They just found this missing girl alive after 32 years, and the truth is baffling everyone. So rewind years ago, back in 1994 in Arizona. A girl called Christina Plant was just 13 years old, living in this lovely rural area with her uncle who had legal guardianship. She lived in the Payson Star Valley, and it sounds absolutely beautiful. She even had stables near to her home where she kept her horse. Like a dream kind of setup, basically. But I guess you never know what's going on behind closed doors, because on one day on the 15th of May, Christina headed over to where she kept her horse and seemed to drop off the face of the earth. Now obviously everybody was totally panicked. This was a young girl in the area, like who had snatched her? It was all over the news. Papers said that police feared she had been abducted. And obviously this was way back before like mobile phones. Nobody was able to trace her mobile or anything like that. And there was certainly not as much CCTV as there is now back then. And certainly not in that rural area anyway. Her disappearance was classified by police as occurring under endangered and suspicious circumstances. Police interviewed a bunch of locals. They were asking everybody for any information that they could give, but nothing was helping. And tragically, the case went cold. But as with these decades-old cases, sometimes they get like re-reviewed years and years later just to see if anything's come up and to see if new technology could help in any way. They ended up tracking Christina down simply using age progression photos and social media. 32 years after she'd originally vanished, she was found alive and well. And she did willingly speak with detectives and told them something that really surprised them. She allegedly said to them that her mum helped her run away from her uncle's house, and she wanted to do this of her own accord. It had all been pre-arranged, and the mum and daughter went to the airport, took off and started a new life. And people have so many questions about this case, like, hang on, how come the uncle had custody of her in the first place? Like, why did the mum lose custody? And also, why would the little girl want to leave the uncle's house? What was going on there? If she's run away with her mum who didn't have custody, technically isn't that kidnap? She's apparently now totally fine and happy, and she's got a family of her own, and the community is just happy to have this case solved.
These teenage girls were plotting to kill a teenage boy in order to bring back, to resurrect, the Sandy Hook killer. I wish I was fucking joking. This one goes by Jimmy, and her real name is Isabel Valdez. She's 15 years old, and then this is her best friend who is 14 years old, Lois Lippert or Leipert. Anyways, the two of them are from Florida, and they came up with this entire plot to murder a 15-year-old boy who was a classmate of theirs. Isabel bought a large knife that was either 10 to 12 inches long, along with gloves, trash bags, wipes, flowers for the boy's funeral. She was planning for his funeral and planning on attending, and cigarettes so she could smoke them after the funeral. And Lois was helping out by buying other supplies for the murder, as well as sharpening the knife. Isabella allegedly told school officials that she was hearing voices telling her to stab the boy in the bathroom to form a blood bond in order to bring back to life this sick motherfucker, who, as a reminder, took the lives of 20 innocent children and 6 innocent adults. All of these people had their lives cut short because of Adam Lanza, and this deranged individual wanted to commit a murder in order to bring him back. When the two of them were arrested When the two of them were arrested in January, they were making jokes in the back of the cop car. They took this entire thing as a joke, saying like, oh, now we're gonna become lesbian lovers in jail. And this one was saying how she wanted to look hot in her mugshot, but couldn't find makeup that morning. I'm glad that they're being tried as adults, because mental illness is not a way out on this one. They seriously premeditated and planned an entire murder in hopes of bringing back an even more deranged murderer.
These were her final moments captured on camera before this monster took everything from her. Athena Strand, a 7-year-old girl living in Paradise, Texas, was outside playing on her parents' driveway when she sees a FedEx driver stop in front of her house, and he's carrying this big brown box towards her front door. And as she's watching him go up the driveway, she notices that he keeps looking at her. And it wasn't a friendly, like, oh, look at her playing kind of stare. It was a predatory, calculating kind of gaze that didn't see a child at all. Rather than dropping the package off at the front door like usual, he quickly sets it down next to her parents' abandoned trailer to the side of the property, and then he started walking towards her. Athena sees the man getting closer and closer and closer to her, and within seconds, she feels these big, rough hands squeeze her body, lift her into the air, while 6 words get whispered into her ears: "Don't scream or I'll hurt you." And with no time to process what was happening, let alone understand what what he was saying, Athena's reality went from playing on her driveway to being slammed into the back of a FedEx truck, the side of her home disappearing with a man that she didn't know. This man was 31-year-old Tanner Horner, someone with no prior criminal record, just a very, very evil plan. As Tanner climbed into the driver's seat and put the truck in gear, he looked back at that little girl who's terrified and confused and gave her a look as cold and evil as the monsters in her storybook. Tanner pulled off the main road and circled the back roads looking for a perfect quiet spot to park. And when he found it, he cut the engine with only the sounds being Athena's nervous breathing in the back. And as Tanner sat in the driver's seat, heart beating with adrenaline, he immediately realized he has a problem. You see, Tanner didn't really have like a fully laid out plan when he kidnapped Athena. He kind of just saw her and decided, yeah, I'm gonna kidnap her. And so this led to something that he didn't really calculate for. Athena has already seen his face. She knows exactly what he looks like. And he knew that if he let her go after all of this, then she would just describe to her parents, or worse, the cops, what he looked like. And as he sat there, completely losing his mind, trying to figure out what the hell he's gonna do, Athena said something that cut his train of thought off in the worst way possible. I'm gonna tell my daddy what you did to me. And that was it. That was all the confirmation he needed to make the decision he was already thinking about. I'm not gonna walk you through the horrible graphics because Athena deserves every protection that we can still give her, but I will tell you that it was something a 7-year-old should never even think the world is capable of. He violently attacked her in the back of that truck to the point where his DNA was found on body parts that no 7-year-old should ever have. And then once he felt satisfied with what he's done, which that statement alone is just absolutely disgusting to say, he tried breaking her neck. But when he realized that didn't work, it just left her scream crying instead, he proceeded to wrap his hands around her neck and squeeze. Athena fought for her life in the back of that FedEx truck for almost a whole hour. And at just 7 years old, she lost that fight to this disgusting, vile, evil waste of space. Tanner then drove 10 miles to the Trinity River and tossed her exposed body into the river like it was nothing. Then while he was driving, he just threw her clothes out of the window along the state highway and finished his route before going home for the night. Meanwhile, Athena's parents were screaming her name out into the dark all night, desperately trying to find out where the hell was their daughter. They immediately filed her as missing, getting the police involved as quick as possible. And once an investigation started, they found out that the package delivered to their house the day before perfectly matched the exact minute Athena disappeared. So all they needed to do was figure out who delivered it. And once Tanner's name got brought up, they pulled his truck footage, and there she was, right there in the back of his truck. When he got arrested and interviewed, he was honestly just spewing lie after lie after lie. But eventually, after wasting hours of time, he broke down and blamed his sinister shadow self, or alter ego named Zero, for the murder. That Zero was the one who did it. I'm just gonna let you guys sit with that dumbass excuse, okay? On April 7, 2026, he pleaded guilty, and as of right now, a jury is deciding between whether he deserves life without parole or death. If you had a seat with the jury, what would you choose? Inside the box Tanner was delivering that day was a set of 6 You Can Be Anything Barbie dolls. Her stepmom bought them for Athena as a Christmas present that was happening just 3 weeks later. And now she will never get the chance to break it open and play with them. That is all that I have for today. Please be safe out there. I love you guys. Mwah. Koopa.
This surgeon has been indicted on account of second-degree manslaughter after he removed the wrong organ from a patient and killed him. His name's Dr. Thomas Shaknovsky, and he's 44 years old. This is the patient, 70-year-old William Bryan. He and his wife Beverly are from Muscle Shoals, Alabama, but when it happened, they had been vacationing in their rental home in Florida. He started having really severe left-sided flank pain, so he went into the ER at Ascension Sacred Heart Emerald Coast in Miramar Beach. And while there, they did imaging and said he had an abnormality with his spleen, and they advised that he be admitted and then have a laparoscopic splenectomy, or surgical removal of the spleen. Now, just to show you a diagram of the abdominal cavity, you can see the spleen up there in purple. It's a very small organ on the left side of the body. But he removed the liver, which as you can see is on the opposite side of the body and huge in comparison. And when he transected through the vasculature of the organ to get it out, it caused catastrophic bleeding, which ended up resulting in his death. That poor man died right then and there on the table. Now, after the doctor removed the organ, he put it in a specimen bag and labeled it spleen. He told the family that it was so diseased that it was 4 times the size it should have been and migrated to the opposite side of the body. But the next day, the pathology report came back showing that it was a healthy liver. And they ended up finding out that the spleen just had a little cyst on the surface and likely didn't even need to be removed in the first place. His wife was absolutely devastated and ended up filing a wrongful death lawsuit. And the attorney on the case ended up finding out that that wasn't even the first time that physician had been involved in a wrong site surgery. In 2023, he was supposed to remove the adrenal gland, but ended up removing part of someone's pancreas. But somehow, he didn't lose his license or privilege and was still allowed to do surgeries. And like I said, finally, on Monday, he was indicted on 1 count of second-degree manslaughter. I don't understand how anybody, especially a general surgeon, can mistake a spleen for a liver. But hopefully he loses his medical license altogether and can never do this to anybody else ever again.
He claimed that a 2-year-old baby girl flirted with him, and that's why he SA'd her. Richard Lee Bell started coercing his girlfriend's 2-year-old baby girl into performing inappropriate acts with him. The victim's biological father stated that the abuse was continuous in just about every way. Richard started SAing the victim at age 2, all the way up until age 7. After everything that's happened, Richard and his defense team claim that the victim initiated the SA at age 2, which is an absolutely mind-blowing and baffling claim to say the least. The now 9-year-old victim wrote an incredibly devastating note stating that she did not want to be alive anymore, and she felt like Richard broke her brain. Now, this case ends up getting even more sickening than it already is, because Richard ends up getting 0 prison time. Richard only receives 5 years of probation with 0 time in prison. Obviously, Richard cannot contact the victim, the victim's family, or any minors. Are you kidding me? Was my thought the entire time that I was researching this case. The victim deserves justice. She clearly didn't get justice because I don't call this justice. Richard is literally free, and in my opinion, he deserves to be locked up. But what do you guys think about this case?
You got some blood drops on your shoes.
Yeah. This was 27-year-old Janet Garcia when she was approached about her missing 4-year-old son in 2024. According to Janet's mother, Maria, her daughter had been acting crazy. She had called the authorities and told them that her daughter was using drugs and that she was a danger. Maria had contacted DCYF to inform them that her daughter Janet had been hitting Ariel, her 4-year-old son, and was also being very abusive and neglectful towards her 7-year-old son, who she reportedly woke up in the middle of the night, dragged him out of bed without shoes on, and dragged him into a bar. But here's the thing, Maria's primary language was Spanish, which should be and is very widely known. But whoever she spoke on the phone with clearly did not understand the extent of the situation, and there was a language barrier issue. So DCYF determined that her concerns were not enough to open a case. But the very next day, DCYF received another call. This call was from the hospital and from an officer because Janet had taken both of her children to the hospital. Now, what we know is from the 7-year-old boy, and he reportedly said that his mom, Janet, grabbed him by the neck and dragged him down the stairs. And then a few days later, on March 27th, a caseworker went to the school where the 7-year-old boy attended and asked him if he felt safe at home. He said that he felt safe both at home and at school, and a counselor at the school said that she didn't think there was any concerns with the boy's home life. That very same day, though, Janet's ex-boyfriend's mom reported that Janet and her 4-year-old son Ariel were missing. In the apartment, there was a large blood stain and a child-sized handprint in blood. A 24-hour manhunt for Janet ensued after that, and the authorities were able to get a hold of her in a phone call where she just said that, Ariel was fine and that he just fell out of bed that morning and then she dropped him off in Oregon, but then that story changed and she said that she dropped him off in Seattle. That then brings us to this moment where they found Janet at a mental health hospital that she'd kind of been in and out of a few times before, and she still had fresh blood stains on her shoes and on her clothes. And on March 28th, the authorities discovered the body of Ariel. Only 4 years old, and his own mother had stabbed him 16 times, wrapped him up in a blanket, and disregarded him on the side of the road. And then in April of 2025, she was deemed competent for trial, but she has not gone to trial yet.
This case is so sad. This mother here saw her 4-year-old little boy kneel down beside a chair with his head resting on it, and she left him there for over 24 hours before finally figuring out that he was deceased. So this is an older picture of her. Her name's Amy Ruhlman, and she's from Waynesboro, Pennsylvania. On Tuesday at around 1 o'clock in the afternoon, she called the police to notify them that her son was unconscious and not breathing. When they arrived, they pronounced him deceased right there at the scene, and the coroner later stated that it appeared he had been deceased for over 24 hours. She told investigators that her son, who has autism, was sick on Sunday, throwing up, and then she gave him Tylenol sometime on Monday morning, and then at around 7:30 that evening, they fell asleep together on the couch. She said that she had woken up at around 4 o'clock in the morning and saw him kneeling down beside a chair with his head resting on it, but she thought he was asleep, so she just left him there and went to bed. Now, why on earth would she not pick him up and carry him into his bed? She said she woke up for the day at around 11:30 in the morning and noticed he was in that same position. So for some reason, she decided to take a picture of him and then send it to a family member. Then over an hour later, at around 1 o'clock p.m., she realized he was cold to the touch, unconscious, and not breathing, so she called 911. It was determined that her son was extremely malnourished and weighed only 25 pounds, which is significantly below the average for his age and height. And she admitted to police that he had missed several doctor's appointments and actually hadn't seen one since 2024. When police were searching the home, they found controlled substances and paraphernalia that was within his reach. She was arrested and charged with child endangerment, and her bond is set at $1 million. Now, his cause of death hasn't been determined yet, but I imagine that after that comes out, she'll likely get more charges. Now, in my personal opinion, this is negligence all the way around. If he apparently went to sleep at 7:30 p.m. on Monday, then why did she sleep in until 11:30 on Tuesday and not even check on him? I don't know of any child, or anybody for that matter, that's going to sleep for 16 hours straight on their knees resting up against a chair. And I'm sorry, but you can see it all over her face, so I don't think she should have even been allowed to have that child.
He brutally SA'd his 1-week-old baby because he wanted to give her something to cry about. Hugo Ferreira's wife left the house to go sell some of her clothes to buy nappies. She told Hugo to watch over their 1-week-old baby, Kathleen, and that she would be back very soon. Hugo became incredibly enraged because his wife did not come back within 5 minutes and because his baby would not stop crying. Hugo later admitted that in that moment, he decided to give her something to cry about. Hugo stated, "I grabbed the baby hard at the back of her neck and hit her buttocks repeatedly, and then he pushed his daughter's head against a hard surface." Hugo stated, "I accept that it was a cruel and gruesome attack, especially on such a young baby. The action was clearly illegal and I did it with intent." He then began to gruesomely SA his newborn baby girl. Hugo attempted to hide the baby's severe injuries once his wife returned, but she immediately noticed and rushed Kathleen to the hospital. Unfortunately, Kathleen passed away the next day from severe head injuries. Autopsy results reveal extensive injuries, including a needle puncture in her left groin. Hugo was sentenced to 2 life sentences. Something that absolutely just crushes me about this case is the fact that Hugo admitted that while he was SAing his baby, he knew there was a chance that he might unalive her, but he didn't care. This case is absolutely heartbreaking, and I don't know what to say. But what do you guys think about this case?
She thought she was being followed and was receiving unwanted phone calls before she just disappeared. What happened to Alexis Ware? Alexis Ware was 29 years old and living in Greenville, South Carolina at the time of her disappearance. She is the mother to 2 children, and she just loved her kids so much. One of their fathers was not in the picture at all, but the other was TJ Patterson, and he acted as the father for both of them. And they just had a really good co-parenting relationship. They were no longer together, but they just worked together really well. She was a hairstylist in Greenville, and people came all over to get their hair done by her. She had a very large social media following on Facebook, Snapchat, and Instagram, and she had dreams of actually moving to Atlanta and opening a boutique. Unfortunately, Alexis's mother said she was receiving unwanted phone calls and had been followed by somebody in a truck for weeks. And we don't know who these unwanted phone calls were from. We just know she didn't want to talk to them. She didn't tell anybody who it was. And Alexis was somebody who planned her birthday months in advance, always doing something special. But this year was her 30th birthday, and she hadn't planned anything. The day before she disappeared, she was talking to her mother about how she thought something was going to happen to her and she wasn't going to make it to her birthday. On January 30th, 2022, Alexis is talking to her mother on the phone when she says somebody is sitting in a black truck in front of her apartment. So she calls the police, And when she sees the sheriff car pull up, she takes her kids and runs to her red Honda. She gets them loaded up, and she actually meets TJ at 7-Eleven to drop off the kids. That's what they normally do. It is on Highway 29 in Anderson County, South Carolina. Now, when they're there, they make plans for her to actually follow TJ to his mother's house. But on the way there at 7:30 p.m., TJ says that they approach a red light and Alexis just goes around them and speeds off. He thinks this is weird, obviously, so he calls her to see what the heck she's doing, but she doesn't answer, and then she's never heard from again. Her phone would eventually be pinged, and it showed that at 8:15 p.m. that day that she was 30 miles from that 7-Eleven. The highway camera would catch her in Augusta, Georgia, and then would show her going back to South Carolina. On February 2nd, her car would be found in McCormick, South Carolina, covered in mud, abandoned, just on the side of a rural road. Her keys, purse, phone, wallet were in the car, and then a black bonnet that she was wearing was found beside the car. The area her car was in was close to a deer hunting property and also was surrounded by a lot of forests, but her family has no idea why she would be there in the first place. As of April 2026, Alexis Ware is still missing. She would never voluntarily leave her children, so somebody must have done something to her. TJ Patterson has been 100% cleared, and it's never been publicly put out there who had been calling her or who was parked outside of her apartment that day. If you or anybody you know has any information, no matter how big or small, about the disappearance of Alexis Ware, you can contact the Anderson County Sheriff's Department at 864-260-4400. Thank you for listening to Alexis's story. Be sure to follow for more true crime. And if there are any cases that you think could benefit from a video being made, please feel free to comment them or directly message me. He disappeared in less than 5 minutes. He walked out of his house and never walked back in. What happened to Branson Perry? Branson was a 20-year-old from Skidmore, Missouri. He worked odd jobs such as a roofer or working at a petting zoo. He really enjoyed doing martial arts and was actually a black belt in it. And his parents had recently divorced and he was living with his father. He was known as a friendly, helpful guy, and there was just no signs that he wanted to harm himself or leave his life. On Tuesday, April 10th, 2001, Branson had friends over to help him clean the house because Branson's dad, Bob, was actually hospitalized and was hoping to be discharged that Friday. While cleaning, everybody said that everything seemed completely normal with Branson. There was nothing out of the ordinary. On Wednesday, April 11th, 2001, Branson's friend Gina was over, and there were 2 mechanics outside because something was wrong with Bob's car, and they were fixing it. Now, Branson's mom, Becky, describes this day on her website, bringbransonhome.wordpress.com. She describes it as fairly sketchy and makes no sense. So if you have a lot of questions through all this, just know, so do the rest of us. Gina sees Branson digging through the cabinets, grabbing something, and then running outside. When he comes back, she asks him what he was doing, and he basically just says nothing. But then later on, Gina will go take a shower, and when she gets out of the shower, she goes into the kitchen to see one of the mechanics digging through the cabinet. And when she asks him what he was doing, he basically says the same thing, just nothing, and he walks back out. At about 3 p.m., Gina is upstairs when she hears the front door open. She looks outside and opens the window to see Branson, and she says, what are you doing? And he tells her that he's taking the jumper cables to the shed and he'll be right back. But 2 to 3 minutes later, he's still not back, and Gina finds it weird, so she looks outside, and she doesn't see anything. So she thinks that Branson just, walked off, went to talk to somebody, went to go do something else, so eventually she just leaves. Bob would not end up coming home that Friday, but Bob's mother, Joanne, started getting concerned when she didn't hear from Branson, so she went to the house to check on him. The radio was on, the doors were open, but Branson wasn't there. So then she would come back the following day, that Saturday, and he still wasn't there, so she started calling friends and family with no luck. Bob would end up being discharged on Monday, April 16th, and Bob and Branson's mother, Becky, would file a missing persons report that day. The mechanics say they never saw anything. All of Branson's belongings were left behind, and the jumper cables were actually missing until 2 weeks later when they were just mysteriously found in the shed. And there's something else weird about the events leading up to Branson's disappearance. On April 7th, 4 days before he goes missing, Branson goes over to a neighbor named Jason's house. Jason put something in Branson's drink and took advantage of him. Branson told his father, who was angry about it, but I can't find anything on if law enforcement was notified of this, and I can't find anything either on if Jason was interviewed about Branson's disappearance. In April of 2004, a man named Jack Wayne Rogers would be sentenced to 17 years for assault, 7 years for illegal surgery, and 30 years for child. Now, if you want a video about Jack Wayne Rogers, I can definitely make that. I can't discuss it all in this or it'll be super long. But what connects him to Branson is he was discussing on message boards about how he picked up a blonde hitchhiker around the same time Branson went missing and said that he unalived him. Now, Branson's mother, Becky, after the sentencing, put out this statement. The police are not completely ruling him out, but now the investigation has turned to Skidmore again. They have received new leads there. I suppose time has a way of unraveling secrets. I believe someone in that area knows what happened to Branson. In my heart, I don't believe this suspect is responsible. Despite the nightmare I lived through, I am thankful that someone with that much evil will never walk the streets again. So she does not believe he is involved. He did all of this in Columbia, Missouri, and she believes that it's somebody in Skidmore, Missouri, where Branson was living. Somebody obviously knows what happened to Branson Perry. On August 14th, 2022, the sheriff actually came out and said they have a suspect in mind and they just need more evidence before they can make that arrest. So if you or anybody you know knows anything about what could have happened to Branson Perry, you can contact the Nottoway County Sheriff's Office at 660-582-7451.
Pleasant Grove, Utah. Megan Huntsman and Darren West met in high school, and she quickly became pregnant after that. When she turned 18, she moved out of her mother's house and moved in with Darren. The two ended up getting married after their second child, but the relationship took a turn for the worse when Darren started distributing methamphetamines. The two became extremely addicted, and in 2006, Darren went to jail for it. While Darren was in prison, Megan was still living in their house. Now, their house was owned by Darren's parents. At around 2010, 2011, Megan started having an affair. But is it really an affair? Because you've been locked up since 2006. It's now 2010, 2011. Darren got wind of this affair and told his parents, hey, get her out of that house. But the children could stay. It was 3 daughters at this point. This is 2 daughters. I didn't blur their face out. This is how the picture came. But the daughters could stay. So Megan left. She left to live with her new boyfriend in Salt Lake City. The girls weren't living there by themselves either. It was another family member living there looking after them. But fast forward to April 2014, Darren finally gets out of prison. And on April 12th, he decided to clean out the garage because he's preparing to move back in with his daughters. As Darren and some of his other family members are moving stuff out of the garage, Darren comes across a box that's fully wrapped in duct tape. So of course, you want to see what's in this box. As he ripped the duct tape off, and inside of the box is a bag also wrapped in duct tape, but a smell hit him to the point where his face had scrunched up. When he struggled to get the duct tape off the bag and rip the bag open, it was a decomposed newborn baby in there. Darren was in a state of shock. He immediately called Megan. And Megan said, yes, that is one of our babies, but I had miscarried it. Please don't call the police. I will come and get it. Darren hung up that phone and immediately called the police. And you can hear in the 911 call how shaken up he was. When the police arrived, Darren told them everything. They asked him, was the baby yours? And Darren was not sure. He'd been locked up since 2006. So they decided to call Megan. And Megan confirmed, yes, I miscarried before he went to prison. That is his baby. And they said, well, you're going to have to come down here to answer some questions. They said, never mind. We're going to come and get you. During questioning, Megan said the baby is from 2006 and she miscarried at home after Darren was locked up. And they asked her why you didn't call the authorities. And she said she was so high out of her mind that she didn't even think about calling the police. The detective started feeling bad. He like, your husband just went to prison. You got to take care of the 3 kids yourself. You was under a lot of stress until his phone rang. And it was one of the detectives back at the home. They found a second baby wrapped in a blanket, put in another box. Now, while the police is out there stunned that they just discovered this other baby, the neighbor comes over and said, I just complained about the smell coming from this house the week prior. When a detective told Megan that they found a second baby, she just bust out and said, there's more. He looking like, there's more? She said, there's more. They're all miscarriages. I miscarried. He asked her how many babies is it, and she said 4. At that point, they called in 24 police officers to search this place. The detective focused back on Megan, asking her how did she miscarry that many times without anybody knowing. She said that she never showed why she was pregnant, and she never told anybody that she was pregnant. She said she even had a baby while Darren and his family was in the living room watching TV. She was upstairs in the bathroom having a baby. She said she had another one while her children was at school. She would clean herself up, put the baby in a box, put it in the garage, and they wouldn't know anything by the time they got home. She don't know the exact dates of all this happening because, like she said, she was high out of her mind on meth. But this is where Megan told on herself when the investigators asked her, the baby that you had in the tub, was it alive? And Megan said, for a short period of time. He said, what's a short period of time? Did you see it breathing? Did you hear a heartbeat? She said, I heard a heartbeat. Okay. The baby that you had in your bed, was it breathing when it came out? She said it might have. Noted. Now the detective is thinking you had a chance to save these babies, but you did not. So he asked the final question. Did you kill these babies? Megan said, and I quote, I was so high out of my mind, I choked them. The detective, so stunned by this information, he stepped out. When he stepped out, he returned a call from one of the officers back at the house. They're on baby number 5. The detective quickly stepped back into the interrogation room and was like, they're on baby number 5. You said it was 4. Megan said, I was so high off my mind. I don't know. It could be more. He like, well, how many more? She said 8 or 9. After baby number 5, they found baby number 6. Baby number 7 was the last baby that they found in that garage. The detectives called Darren in for questioning because they thinking that he had something to do with it. Because they like, ain't no way you didn't know she was pregnant this many times. But Darren did not know. And you could tell from the 911 call. And when they told him that it was 7 babies in that garage, he burst into tears. Darren also said when she was pregnant with 2 of his daughters, he didn't even know she was pregnant until month 5 for both of them. I've never seen nobody just not show like month 5. 39-year-old Megan Huntsman hid babies from 1996 to 2006. 6 babies were full term and alive when they exited the womb. She choked them. The 7th baby was a stillborn. All 7 babies were Darren West. She was arrested in April 2014, held on a $6 million bond, $1 million for each child. She took a plea deal in February 2015, and she was sentenced to 30 years to life on April 20th, 2015. And her daughters have stood beside her this entire time, still standing beside their mama. They said she has always been a good mother to them. Now, even though Megan said she did what she did because of her addiction and she didn't want her children to grow up in that environment, Utah has a law to where you can drop off your newborn baby or child with no questions asked. You can drop them off to hospital or adoption center. You can drop your child off if you can't take care of them. No questions asked. But you decided to strangle them. What y'all think? Springfield, Illinois, 2014, 15-year-old sophomore Megan Nichols and 17-year-old Brody attended the same high school. The two met in Glee Club, and when the two met, it was fireworks. They started flirting off the bat, but Brody was in a whole relationship, or so his girlfriend thought. School dance came around and Brody brought his girlfriend, and Megan also had a date, but the two ended up on the dance floor together, not thinking about who they came with. The dance must have been good because the two ended up leaving the party together. This left Brody's girlfriend on the bleachers crying. After that, Megan is thinking Brody is hers. He is all she could talk about. Her friends was tired of hearing his name. They didn't even approve of him being with her, but she's not listening to them. You can't tell her nothing. Her head is in the clouds. Megan even told her mother about Brody, but she said that he was just a friend. She had a strict rule in her household, no dating before 16. But she started to see a change in Megan. Ever since Brody had entered her life, her mood was up and down. She had quit the Glee Club and she wasn't doing her regular activities that she would normally do. It wasn't until prom rolled around and Brody took his girlfriend instead of Megan. Yes, he had got back with the ex-girlfriend. This crushed Megan, and she expressed to her mom how she was feeling. And that's when her mother, Kathy Jo, took it upon herself to contact Brody and tell him, don't call my daughter phone no more. After Kathy Jo put her foot down, she's thinking everything is over. But Brody showed up at her doorstep. When she opened the door, he said, "Look, you're way too controlling, and I think you need to be on medication." Boy, who the fuck you talking to? Kathy Jo is baffled. She told Brody, "I think you need to leave." And he said, "No, I'm not leaving because you're not going to do anything to her." After telling him 3 times, he finally left. Kathy Jo is thinking everything is back to normal. It wasn't until July 3rd, 2014, when Megan asked her mother if she can go for a bike ride. Kathy Jo said yes, just as long as you ain't out there doing something you ain't supposed to be doing. When Megan got back, she rode with her mother to do some shopping. Now, halfway through their shopping, Megan told her mother that her stomach hurt and can she drop her off back at home. And that's what her mother did. And she went out to continue her shopping. Kathy Jo made it back to the house around 11 p.m. and started making her something to eat. She's thinking Megan is asleep. While her food is on the stove, she decided to go check on Megan and noticed that she was not in her room. She called all Megan's friends. She even called Brody, and none of them haven't seen or heard from Megan. That's when she decided to go down to the police station to report her missing, but they were no help at all. Teenage runaways, y'all know what they be saying. So when Kathy Jo got back home to check her room once again and pull back the covers, she seen Megan's phone, but it was wiped clean. Kathy Jo said that she didn't know what else to do, so she decided to pray. When she went to the TV room to kneel down and pray, that's when she seen a note left by Megan saying that she loved her, but she was not happy where she was at, and telling Kathy Jo, "Don't try to find me." She took the phone and the note back down to the police station, and that's when they labeled Megan missing. Around 7 a.m. the morning of the 4th of July, Kathy Jo pulls up to Brody's house. And guess what he's doing? Washing his car at 7 in the morning. Kathy Jo said, "Where's my daughter?" And he said, "I don't know." When Brody was called in for questioning, he told the detectives that him and Megan were just friends and nothing else. They asked him, "Did anything sexual ever happen between y'all?" And he said no. He was not a suspect at the time. Now, even though Megan's cell phone was wiped clean, they were still able to get into that iCloud. And once they got into that iCloud, these two were talking literally all day, sun up to sundown. In the messages, it was clear that the two were sexually active, but it also was clear in the messages that the two were planning to run away together. Brody was called in for questioning again, and this time with the evidence, he admitted, "Yes, we were sexually active." And yes, we did plan on running away together, but I was never going to go through with it. They took Brody's car to search it, and it was a dark red spot in the trunk. But the test came back that it wasn't blood. Brody was cooperative. He was even helping with the searches for Megan. But the people around town was still a little skeptical about him, and this pissed Brody off to the point where he made a Facebook status saying he was sick of all this and that he did not have anything to do with her disappearance. Megan's case went cold. The only thing they had was her on surveillance at an ATM withdrawing $200 while she was on her bike, the same bike ride she had asked her mother to go on July 3rd. It wasn't until 3 years later, December 26, 2017, a local farmer was out looking for firewood, but he came across a human skull. It was in a shallow grave right outside of town. On January 26, 2018, it was properly identified to be Megan's remains. Brody had moved on with his life. He had moved to Indiana. He was in college. He thought, everything is in the clear. But what he did not know is that the investigators was opening that cold case file right back up, and they were starting with his car. Brody had totaled the car just a year before Megan's body was found. The car was fixed up and sold to somebody else. The detectives picked up the car and decided to examine the trunk just a little further. Not only was the spot still there, they tore up the trunk to look even deeper, and with the help of the luminol, it was all types of blood down there. It was a match. It was Megan's blood in Brody's trunk. Now, even though the police had this evidence, they wanted a confession. So they asked Brody's roommate if he could wear a wire to get one. And the roommate agreed, but Brody is no dummy. The first time the roommate asked the questions, Brody said, "I don't know what happened to her." But when he asked again, Brody whispered into his ear and said, "Are you wearing a wire?" The roommate was on Brody's side until he questioned him a second time, and Brody hypothetically said, "I don't know, maybe somebody just got mad and strangled her." Who says that? Brody was arrested on October 7th, 2020. His trial started a year later, with the main evidence being with Megan's blood in his trunk. Now, Brody said the blood was there because the two were being intimate and she was on her cycle. Well, they said, "Well, why are you just now telling us this?" But he said he was embarrassed. And the text messages showed that he was the last one with Megan. In January of 2023, he was found guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced to 50 years. He still has never said what happened on July 3rd of 2014, but it's speculation that the two were arguing about leaving. It's speculation that Megan was packed and ready to go, but Brody was playing. I feel like he maybe snapped. But what made me mad about this case is y'all just tested that spot in his trunk the first time any type of way because it came back not blood. But then y'all do it again years later and it's blood. This man has been out here just living his life. He should have been in jail. 1997, Hollywood, California. 32-year-old Leslie is in the 99-cent store minding her business when she's approached by 45-year-old Lau Hearing. The two hit it off quickly. Lau would show Leslie around California because she was new there. Her and her family migrated from Guyana, which is in South America. The two eloped just a year after meeting each other, and even though the women in Leslie's family took Lau in, it was the men that was looking at him sideways. Leslie's brother said it was just something about him. He couldn't put his finger on him, but nevertheless, the two lived a good ass life. They had a nice condo in Hollywood, California. The two had even bought a boat so they can vacation on the weekends. Leslie was a very private person. She didn't talk about her relationship too much. So from the outside looking in, everything looked perfect until February 9th, 2009. Leslie did not show up for work, which was strange because they said she hadn't missed a day in 11 years. When Leslie's boss couldn't get a hold of her, she decided to call her sister, Asha Davis. Now, Asha is a Hollywood actor. I personally remember her from the movie Paria. But when she talked to Asha, Asha also hasn't heard from Leslie. So Asha decides to call their brother, and he hasn't heard from Leslie either. For nobody to call Lau's phone immediately lets me know that nobody liked him for real. They had been married for 11 years at this point, and he was not the immediate call. She called the sister instead of the husband. But anyways, Asha finally called Lau's phone, but he's not answering either. Now Leslie's family is worried. They don't know if the couple has been kidnapped. They don't know if something has happened to them while they were on their boat this past weekend. Asha called her brother back and they both went over to their sister's condo. Now, from the outside, everything looked normal. It didn't look like nobody tried to break in. They knocked multiple times and waited outside of Leslie's condo for hours. After not getting any movement from inside of the apartment or getting any type of callbacks, Asha decided to call the Los Angeles police to do a welfare check. Now, when the police gained access inside the apartment, it was two things that caught everyone's attention immediately. A candle was knocked over and the wax had hardened on the counter and on the floor. And in the bathroom, it was a pile of wet and dry towels. The police filed a missing persons report and began trying to see when was the last confirmed sighting of Leslie, which was Friday, February 6th, when she was packing up to leave work for the weekend. But her phone told a different story. On February 8th, just the day before she was reported missing, Leslie was receiving and answering calls, but still no sightings of her. Leslie's family launched an intensive campaign to find her. Her sister Asha used her status and her platforms to get her sister's face and name out there. This case made headlines. Asha had said herself that she thought something terrible had happened to her sister. Mind y'all, she had just gave birth a couple weeks prior, and she was out there feet to pavement trying to get the word out about her sister. The investigation yielded nothing. No leads, no communication from Leslie or Lau. But just 2 weeks later, Lau's car is stopped at the Mexican border. He's alive, he's unharmed, but he's alone. He is immediately taken in for questioning, and the first thing the police noticed is he done shaved his head and he done shaved his beard. When questioned about Leslie's disappearance, Lau said that the two had argued Saturday night, February 7th. And when he woke up on Sunday, Leslie was gone. He said he'd been in Mexico for 2 weeks trying to find Leslie because the two had a romantic Valentine's Day getaway planned in Mexico, and he thought that Leslie went without him. When asked about his drastic change in appearance, Lau told investigators that he owed a gang some money. And when they caught up with him, they pinned him down, shaved off his dreadlocks, and shaved off his beard. Come on, man. When investigators press Lau for more information about Leslie, he shuts down. He said, I don't want to answer any more questions. I don't know where she is. But before they decided to release him, they said, we going to go check out this condo one more time. And Leslie's nightstand was all her jewelry, her earrings, necklaces, bracelets. Her purse was also still there with her ID, credit cards, cash. But what the detectives didn't expect to find was a letter tucked away by her nightstand. The letter told how the marriage was really going. Leslie was tired of her husband. She said all he does is lie. She don't like going day by day, not knowing if they're going to have a roof over their head or not. She didn't know if they was going to have enough money just to get by. She said she was tired and broken on the inside. In Leslie's purse, it was a Starbucks receipt that was dated 4 days after her disappearance. When the investigators went to that Starbucks to run that tape, guess who they see? Loud dumbass purchasing a drink. You didn't think they was going to check the receipts? This is when the police decided to seize all his electronics. He had Google search the profile of a mass murderer, the Mexican border, and what country do I flee to? Now, remember I said Leslie's phone was receiving and answering calls like she was still alive, but her cell phone pinged in the same location as Lau's, which means he was calling and answering, making it look like she was answering her phone. While the police is gathering evidence and questioning all the family members, they came across Lau's cousin, Malcolm. Malcolm said he seen him just a couple days after Leslie's disappearance, but this was before anybody even knew she was missing. He said that they were talking outside of the apartment, which he thought was weird, but mid-conversation, he asked Lau could he use the restroom, and Lau said no. A neighbor of theirs also came forward saying that they seen Lau with a dolly with a rolled up carpet. They said his hood was down and he looked sweaty and frantic. Asha Davis is doing TV appearances, interviews, still very active about finding her sister. But at this point, Lau, he stopped communicating with them. They seized both of Lau's car, and the cadaver dog detected a decomposing body in not one of his vehicles, but both. But they felt they still didn't have enough to charge him yet. So before returning his vehicles, they put a GPS tracker on both. Now, the first 2 days were normal, no suspicious activity. But that third day, Lau had got up at 6 a.m. and went to a park that was just a couple miles from their home. He parked his car and walked to the dumpsters. It looked like he was looking for something. He was kicking dirt around, looking in and around the dumpsters. Then he just got in his car and left. Now, later that day, the police brought the dogs back, and they got a hit for a decomposing body. Lau was arrested in April of 2010, 14 months after Leslie's disappearance. His trial started in April 2013, and he was convicted of second-degree murder in May of 2013. He was sentenced to 15 years to life. He has never said what actually happened, but the theory is that the two got into an argument about the finances and he drowned her, put her in that dumpster, and her remains is in the LA landfill, which they said would be dang near impossible to find. The detective said the steps he took to not get caught is what got him caught. They said if he didn't do that, he probably would have got away with it. Dummy. I hope you're right.